Okay, so we're ready to get started tying our monkey fist knot. A few of the items that I'm going to use for this project. Paracord, obviously. This one's made by Spider Cord, owned by Survival Life. Use whatever paracord that you want. I have a jig here. Just like everything else with this tutorial, it's your own personal preference. There are so many different types of jigs out there for you to choose from. I happen to like this one, have it on hand, it rotates. But once again, there is no wrong way. It's whatever you prefer. As long as you get the job done, that's all that really matters. And of course, you can make your own and in probably 30 minutes or so. So keep that in mind. I do like this one because of the stand. I'm able to clamp it down, so when I'm doing work, it's not going to move around. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I want to leave it loose so that I could show you various angles. It's going to be tough enough looking through this viewfinder on the camera to try to tie this knot correctly that I don't want to be stationary and then not be able to get the point across as I'm trying to get it across to you. I have 14 feet of paracord that I cut up. Now keep in mind I'm using a 1-inch ball bearing, so I'm going to be doing 5 passes or 5 total lashings or strands that are going to go around it. And that takes about 6 feet of paracord just for the ball part. So whatever I have left over, that's what I'll have to be able to make my handle. Whenever I do tie a monkey fist knot, I think of a self-defense tool or self-defense application. So I want that beefier, girthier handle so that I could go ahead and be able to deploy the monkey fist tool the way I would want to. And for me, 14 feet seems to do the key because I want 4 feet left over on each side plus the 6 feet that's going into the middle. I have a fid or a needle to make things a little bit easier for me as I'm going through the weaving process on the inside, and I'll show you later as we continue the tutorial. I have a marlin spike, which just kind of helps to lift up the knots once it starts getting tighter and you want to cut out some of the slack. So I have one of these. I have a pair of pliers. I have a lighter. I have measuring tape here, which helped me measure out this 14 feet. And I have a pair of scissors. Now what I like to do is to be able to get the needle on, right, or the fid, right away. Some people like it towards the middle, towards the end. I figure since I have to do it, might as well get it out of the way right in the beginning. So what I like to do here is, since it is a little bit frayed, I like to go ahead and fuse it a bit, utilizing the lighter. All right, not too much, just to kind of get it contained because I want to try to get it as pointy as possible. That's why I like using my pliers here also, so that I could go ahead and just kind of squeeze it down just a little bit, flattening it out to hopefully make it easier to get into the needle here as far as the threading that's on the inside. To do that also, to make it just a little bit more of a point, I like to cut the end here on this angle, okay? Giving it more of a point to hopefully be able to feed into here a heck of a lot easier. So I just kind of start putting in the beginning end, and I start going ahead and screwing the actual needle, hoping that the threads of the needle end up catching on to the paracord itself and kind of adhering it to it so that I can go ahead and be able to sew with it, okay, or weave with it. So once again, I'm making that happen. It's pretty good to go. It's in there. So we have that one side done. This is going to be our working end as we're tying the knot. So this is the one that's actually going to wrap around. So realizing that, we need the other end now. This one's already fused. And what I want to do is measure out the 4 feet that we're going to have left over. We'll have 4 feet on both sides, but this one we need to measure out right from the beginning. So I could either use your measuring tape or go ahead and eyeball it like I'm doing it now. And I want to measure out about 4 feet. So you figure that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I have my 4 feet. I'm going to kind of just pinch this end. And what I want to do here is tie an overhand knot on that non-needle end. So I have my overhand knot here, and what I want to do is feed it through one of my posts. Okay, so that is here. So I have this end, that's the 4 feet, that's the non-needle end. So I kind of could put that towards the side, kind of get it out of the way. And the remainder of all of this is what we're going to use to actually tie the monkey fist knot. So this would be the needle end. So we're going to go 5 strands since we're using our 1-inch ball bearing. And I'm going to go ahead and start tying those 5 strands, right, or wrapping them. Keeping everything as straight as possible, trying to get all these little bends and turns out of your paracord. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have 5 going that way. Remember, this is our starting point. Our little reference is our overhand knot here. We got 5 going across. From here, I'm coming back up as if I were to do a 6th one, but I'm not. I'm actually going to cut or feed through the middle here. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. Came from this starting point where the overhand knot is, 5 strands. On that 6th start, I'm kind of feeding through and I'm going to wrap around this way. So now I'm taking my needle, going all the way around the back strands, feeding it here forward, pulling through. And just like all the sides here, it's going to have 5 wrappings or 5 strands. So there's 1, 2, okay, so you can tell here I have 2 coming here from the bottom. Don't pay attention to this knot. That's just there temporarily as a guiding point. And as I bring it here, I'm about to start my 3rd one. But before I start the 3rd one, I actually like to kind of hold it there, grab my ball bearing and start feeding it through that little bird's nest or cave that we just created. And then I could go ahead and start wrapping that 3rd one. Okay, and once again, just bringing it around the back, adding 3 to there, pulling it towards the front with the needle end. Here we go. So now 3, starting the 4th on that side. Adding the 4th one towards the back now. Okay, so we got all of these 4. Coming on here, actually starting the 5th one and last one. So coming all the way around, pulling our needle through, trying to keep everything as organized and neat as possible, not pulling too tight, but tight enough to be able to contain that ball bearing in there. Okay, so now we're down to the 5th one. So we have our starting point, which is where we know our overhand knot is. Okay, from there, we came across and came under. Have all 5 of our strands on all different sides, including the bottom and the back. So from here, instead of going around and making that 6th one, we're actually going to go here and we're going to go up. Okay, up. I just kind of pinch it in there, grab my needle, and I'm going to feed it through. Okay, so almost like where the sewing part begins here. So I like moving it forward a little bit to give my more room, or give my needle more room. But obviously you don't want to pull it too far to the end or you're going to end up losing it, like I have countless times, right? So just keep that in mind. A lot of the stuff we're going to learn through experience. Tutorials are great to give you that little head start and, to give you your orientation. But then from there, your work, your practice, your experience is what's going to lead to your success rate. Okay, so from here, pulling it down through. So remember, I fed it through here, pulling it down through. And now I want to go ahead and feed it underneath here. Okay, so underneath, coming through the bottom. So we went in through the top, now we're coming out the bottom, feeding it through. Keeping it as neat as possible. I like to push everything towards me. So we already got that first strand on the back. Now we're bringing it up to make the first strand on the front. Once again, feeding it through, pulling it through, making sure stuff doesn't get tangled, trying to keep everything as straight as possible. Once again, just dropping the needle through again towards the back. Strand number 2, so once again going through the bottom again. Going through the bottom, underneath, turning it towards the front, feeding it through. So that makes strand number 3 on the back and strand number 2 on the front. And once again, we want to get 5. So we'll just keep that going. As you continue working, things get a little bit easier because you run out of less paracord, so to speak, as far as slack. Everything, keeping everything nice and tight, but not too tight. Feeding it through the back again. Now you can see why I like having this thing their jig clamped down. Doesn't move around on me. Okay, so we got 3 in the back now. Need to sew through on the bottom again, going through with the needle, coming towards the front. Now we got 3 in the back, going towards 3 in the front. 1, 2, third one coming up. Like I said, I keep pushing those strands towards me. Or if you're looking at it dead on, towards the left, just to keep it nice and organized, nice and neat. The neater that you are in the beginning, the easier it'll bode for you later. And once again, feeding number 4. And you could tell this is really where the fit or the needle comes in handy. As things get a little bit tighter, it gets to be more of a pain, and that's why that sharp needle just seems to cut right through it, making life easier. Feeding through, feeding through, feeding through, feeding through. Keeping everything untangled here. Now I'm ready at 4 on the back. This is actually going to be the 5th pass. Bringing that down. Okay, so you can tell we have 5 on the back there. Feeding through the bottom. Okay, and here we have 4, and this last one feeding through will make it 5. Once again, sometimes I end up taking the actual whole knot off after the 3rd strand or whatever, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I figured I would just leave it on the jig, and hopefully it would be easier to see than it being just bundled up in my hand. All right, so just like everything else, you want to go ahead and check now and make sure that we have 5 strands on all sides. So there's 5 there, there's 5 here, there's 5 on the bottom, there's 5 on the back, and there's 5 on the front. All right, so knot is pretty much tied. Okay, so what we want to do here is we still have our reference point, which is our overhand knot that we had tied earlier. All right, so as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking of this one, and as I pull this one through here, I can tell that it's coming out here from the bottom. Okay, so I know that's not the side I want to start yet because I'm really looking for the center here. When I go to this end here, I know that it's coming from here, okay, because that's where the slack is. So I know it's not this one, right? As far as this one, I know it's not that one. So just pretty much looser end here, that's the center. So that's kind of where I want to start. And to think about it, the first direction I want to go towards is the overhand knot. All right, so what I'm going to do here is just start pulling out just a little bit of slack. Okay, not going too crazy on this first pass, even though it's still relatively tight from being on the jig itself. So from here, as I pull out the slack, I see that here's the second one. So I go ahead and pull out the slack here, just making it just a little bit tighter as I continue going towards the right, and just kind of work that all the way across. Going to the 3rd one now, making sure everything's relatively neat, not pulling excessively, of course. We don't want it to be super, super tight. You just want to kind of just go little by little. Always get you there the fastest with less mistakes. Okay, so once again, just paying attention to everything, getting these other strands out of the way, seeing where this one is. As I feed that through, I could tell that the slack is here. So making everything nice and neat on both sides, making sure the ball's in the center, just giving it a good squeeze every once in a while, just to get that reference point. From here, as I'm feeding through, taking out that slack, fastening everything down, making sure all the lashings are good, or strands are good. Pulling this through. Getting rid of all this slack here. Continue working it around. Get rid of any twists or any obvious twists right now. And now, as you could tell, it's getting to the other side now, so needed to kind of just switch it up a little bit, move it towards the other direction, and just really just still following the same guide. Wherever there's slack, go ahead and pull it through. So still keeping that in mind, still following through here. So this is where the slack is, pulling it through, making sure everything's nice and neat, everything's aligned, not pulling super, super tight, just enough to be able to feed it through and taking off a little bit of slack each time. Same thing here, feeding it through. Going a little bit tighter each time. Pulling through. Still feeding it through. Not difficult, but a little tedious. And definitely time consuming, especially as you continue and to get more and more and more of the slack out, depending, of course, how much you want to, how tight you want your monkey fist knot to be. So still going ahead and working the slack through. As my pit bull snores away on the couch, probably being picked up on the volume here. Sorry about that. It's definitely not my breathing. Feed this through. You can tell going up to the other side. So once again, even when it's switching sides or whatever the case may be, you're still just working that slack out. So pretty easy to find your reference point and continue. So from here, still on this side, feeding it through. Feeding it through. Go. So it's actually starting to look like a ball now, taking the proper shape. As you can tell, it's just a matter of working it all the way around, not too complicated. A little bit of patience usually gets you there the fastest. Every time I try to rush these, something ends up going wrong and end up having to do it all over again. So learn from my mistakes and don't rush. Okay, tighten that through. And now we're here, and you could tell we're basically at the needle end. Okay, so I can go ahead and pull that through. And we kind of have the start of our monkey fist knot here. Okay, so it's just a matter of continuing to tighten it up, and tighten it up, and tighten it up, which once again could be a tedious process and takes a while. All right, so now, once again, I'm back to my reference point on the overhand knot being here. So from here, what I want to do is I know that this was the center, and I went to the right. So from here, I kind of want to start working it towards the left and doing the same exact thing that we had done before. So this part, hopefully I could fast forward a little bit for you, but I still want to go ahead and work it while we're on camera. Okay, so here we have it, 5 strands. Monkey fist knot, once again, could use a lot more tightening, but for the purpose of this tutorial, you pretty much know what to do to get you started. And then the rest, as I said, when you're using these type of marlin tools, okay, marlin spikes, you can go ahead and dig in here and start pulling up to get the slack to really make it tighter. And same scenario, you work it to the right, work it to the left. If this ends up not being good enough, you can go ahead with your pliers and start using them to pull up these strands. But, you know, keep in mind that you could also mess up your paracord and start getting it to fray, so on and so forth. So you do want to be careful. But usually for the purposes of what I need it for, as I said, especially when you're trying to utilize it as a self-defense tool, all right, obviously I would go ahead and tie a handle onto here. That's why we have all of this extra paracord, 4 feet on each side. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll actually save it for a later tutorial. All right, so this is Helder, Monkey Fist Knot. Hope you learned something. Hope I was able to share some information with you. And good luck.